So you often think of Jesus, when the world thinks of Jesus, they compare him to various categories, right? Like he was a great teacher, he was a great preacher, a miracle worker, all of those things. But Jesus is on a category unto his own, right? And so to even compare him is like, it's almost sacrilegious. I love that meme that shows Jesus sitting with Superman and Spider-Man and Batman and all the superheroes. And Jesus is telling them, let me show you how I save the world. Let me tell you how to save the world. But he's an original. He's a category unto his own. But I wonder whether you believe that about yourself. Do you know that there is no one else in the world like you? I think you know it, but you find it really hard to believe it. We live our lives as if we don't believe that there is no one else in the world like you and like me. And this is for us the first and the most primary value of our church, is that every human being, right? Next slide. Thanks, bro. Every human being is a uniquely created being of eternal worth with a unique story. That for us is so important. Because when you're a part of a church, when you come and join a greater body, it's so wonderful that you're connected to a mission that's much bigger than yourself, yeah? And that's great, and you can get plugged in and you can spur yourself on and others can spur you on. But the problem is sometimes when we do that, we actually miss out on what God intends to do through us individually. In our families, in our workspaces, in our communities, in our neighborhoods. Because that's primarily how the Church of Jesus advances, right? It doesn't necessarily advance with people coming in through our doors. Yes, it does. But it advances when our people leave our doors. When we leave our doors. And so even our mission as a church is slightly different to what you would hear, because generally you would hear people saying, this is what we're about, come and join us. But the way we see it in the Bible is that God has a specific purpose and intention for your life, and we want to come alongside you and try and help make that happen. Right? It's a completely different mind shift. Because often we invite people to something, what we actually tend to say is actually, you don't really matter, right? Your story doesn't matter, your pain does not matter. Just come and join us and come and do this thing. Well, that's not us, pals. That's not who we are. We value every human being because Jesus does. And so, this is our desire, is that we will journey with you and walk with you so that God's dream about you, when God created you, Mike, He dreamt a life for you, right? And His desire is for you to walk that life. And for Him to go, that's my boy. And for you, Sharon, that's my girl. That's what our daddy in heaven would want to see, So that's our hearts. And that's why part of what we do as a church, we try and be intrinsically involved in people's lives. And that means that so much of the life of our church is actually not on a Sunday, but out there, in our homes and in the coffee shops and in the spaces where people are at. Because we value every human being as a unique person. A study was conducted a while ago, and but the study was a longitudinal study. In other words, it was conducted over a period of 30 years, right? And at 5 years old, 98% of kids, and to the younger ones in the room, 98% of kids test genius level. Right? So in other words, at 5 years old, most kids are born with an inherent ability to live and to create and to do amazing and wonderful things in the world. But because of the world we live in, by the time the kids are 10 years old, that percentage drops to about 30. And by the time the kids are in their teenagers, it drops again to 12. I'm sure they're way above that. Yeah. They're way above that, don't worry. And the sad truth is, by the time you are an adult, it's down to 2%. It's down to 2%. No wonder we look at people and go, oh, they're so wonderful, they're so marvelous, but yet all of us are born with an inherent ability. And so this is part of why even our logo has a thumbprint on it, because we value the individuality of people that together, collectively, when you're playing your part, when you're walking and living your story, collectively you have an incredible impact in the world, right? And so that's where we want to land today as a church. And so the first text I want to look at, it's not up there, but it's a well-known one, but I want to read it slowly because it's such a beautiful one. It's from Psalm 139, 13-14. It says, you made all the delicate inner parts of my body. This isn't it. You made all the delicate inner parts of my body. You knit me together in my mother's womb. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. Your workmanship is marvelous. How well I know it. Thank you for making me so wonderfully complex. You knit me together. I love that notion of knitting and weaving. So my kid's great-grandma, right? Not grandma, great-grandma. She lives in the UK. She's in her mid-80s. But every winter she knits winter jerseys for her grandkids around the world, right? And so we received ours, a few weeks ago in the post, and our kids wear them quite often, but they're so warm. But the fascinating thing is with every single year, even though it's the same person knitting with the same kind of wool and the same colors, like they somehow always look different, right? They're not the same. They're not the same from one to the next. And I love that imagery of God knitting us together in our mother's womb, that every single person is so unique. And when I say unique, I don't just mean unique DNAs or unique genes, but you are unique in terms of the families that you grew up in, right? I mean, it's so hard for us to think this way because unfortunately the world that we live in strives to conform all of us, right? To conform us into a certain way of thinking. And so it's almost like we are so scared. You know why we're so scared of AI? Let me just say that. Do you know why we are so petrified of AI? Because increasingly AI seems to be becoming more like human beings, and human beings are becoming more and more like robots. That's why we're so scared of AI, but we have nothing to fear. They can never take the place of a human being, right? God has made us so beautiful and so intricately, and so even when you look in the mirror, often when we don't like ourselves, we force ourselves to like ourselves, but often it shows in the world. It shows that you actually don't like you. You would rather be someone else. You'd rather be a copycat and not an original. But this is our desire for our people at Pulse, whoever comes into our communities, that we all become original. So the first thing I want to say this morning is that you are wonderfully unique. You are wonderfully unique. It comes from the text we just read. You are wonderfully unique. So you and I have what they call 7 metacognitive modules, okay, or nodules, one of those. But I don't want to bore you with these facts, but they're so beautiful, okay? The first one is we have an interpersonal capacity to relate to people, right? It's a capacity to understand and interact, right? That's number one. Number 2, we have kinesthetic abilities. In other words, we can manipulate objects and fine-tune our physical skills. Whoever your hero is, A.B. de Villiers or, Henrik Claassen or Kakiso Rabano, whatever. Like, there are some people whose kinesthetic ability is better than others, right? Then we have linguistic ability, so people who are able to manipulate symbols. They're good with words, they're good with languages. Then you have your logical mathematical, right? The scientists, the people, the engineers, those are good with figures and numbers and logic. Then you have the spatial visual people, right? They can think 3D, they can create, they can transform, they can modify, right? These are your creatives. Then you have the musical people, right? The musical people, they're sensitive to pitch and tune and melody. Because if they weren't, worship won't be as good, right? On a Sunday morning. So we have the musical people. Then we have the intrapersonal people. These people, the intrapersonal, they can perceive themselves accurately. Right? So all of us have these, by the way. All of us have all 7, but some of us are stronger than others because we are unique. And the way those 7 interact within you is what makes you you. Now there's 8.2 plus billion people in the world, and yet there's no one like you. The way those things interact is what makes you you. I mean, even looking at this, for me, I am more on the interpersonal, intrapersonal, and linguistic. Those are probably my stronger points, right? But for you, it'll be different. I'll just tell you, in my life, how I see myself unique. So for example, I can detect patterns in my life, right? So last year, a year ago, I was just reflecting on this, and I thought about the major events in my life, the events that have shifted my life in a particular direction. And guess what? They all have occurred in the month of April. They all have occurred in the month of April. In April of 1994 was when my parents decided that God was calling them to be missionaries, and so they left our hometown. That was April 1994. Then April 1999 was when my parents left my country of origin and came to South Africa. That significantly shifted my life now to the point where I've been here for 26 years. That's another April. April of 2013 was when I met my wife, who's sitting right there at the back. April of 2013. I was single for almost 32 years before I met her. Right? And we just go on with the Aprils. I mean, I can tell you so many. So that's my uniqueness. I can detect patterns. Right? I can also detect cycles. Like, there seems to be 7-year cycles in my life. Like, every 7 years, God is moving me to the next phase, to the next level. So that's my uniqueness. But what's yours? The reason I'm telling you this is you are wonderfully unique, and never doubt that. Because everyone wants you to look the same, think the same, be the same. But God says, no, I have my imprint on you. And I've created you for a very specific story. So that's why this is so important for us at Pulse. You are wonderfully unique. And then, you are intentionally chosen. Whew. You are intentionally chosen. So you're not only wonderfully unique, you are intentionally chosen. So before I go to the chosen part, I don't want to forget this. So when spring comes around, which is in a few months' time, we want to start something in our church called Grow Groups. Right? So this is purely voluntarily. So what this means is we're going to be journeying as a church, as a group, those who sign up for it, for 3 months till December, mostly online, an hour a week, but sometimes we'll meet in person. And exactly what I've been speaking about in the last 5 or so minutes is what we want to explore. We want to explore God's thumbprint on your life. Right? We want to explore your story so that you'll know who you are, where you come from. We want to explore how God has designed you, how He's made you. And we want to help you find your place in the world so that you'll be confident that this is what God has made me for, and no longer have to be ashamed to try and be someone else. Right? So you are unique, wonderfully unique. Right? So that's happening in September. We'll send you more details later. Number 2, you are intentionally chosen. Whew. I love Ephesians 2:10, right? Ephesians 2:10. This is what Paul says. He says, "For we are God's masterpiece. He has created us anew in Christ Jesus, so we can do the good things." What? He came up in the spur of the moment. No. So we can do the good things He planned for us long ago. Before He weaved you in the womb. Because, believe it or not, before He made you in the womb, He already had plans for you. Right? He already dreamt of you. You, in a sense, you are living out God's dream for your life. You know? I mean, do you think about this? This is mind-blowing when I thought about this. Like, we often make other people's dreams come true. Whew. You think that when a black man named Barack Obama became president in 2008, he was living the dream of one Martin Luther King Jr. 40 years ago, who dreamt that one day America would judge people not by the color of their skin, but by the content of their character. Was not Barack Obama living out Martin Luther King Jr.'s dream decades after he died? You see, I want you to think yourself in this way, that you're living out, or you can live out God's dream for your life. You are intentionally chosen. You are God's masterpiece. You know that word, masterpiece, literally means it's an extraordinary creation. It is so unique. No one else has your story. No one else has the combination of your genes and your DNA. No one else has your pain. Yes, someone may have pains that are similar to yours, but the way you experience that pain with the relationships in your life and circumstances, no one else has that but you. And that's why he says you are God's masterpiece created in Christ Jesus. So in other words, he's taking all of that pain, all of that sorrow, all of the stuff that's happened to you in the past, and he's transforming it and making it into a masterpiece. So you are like a pen in God's hand, and he's writing out the story of your life. You are an author in God's hand. He's painting the beautiful picture that everyone else can look at and go, wow, this is surely done by an incredible painter. This is who you are, and I cannot emphasize that enough. While we are about a greater purpose in our church, we want to help you fulfill God's intended destiny for your life. See, we are people of destiny. God is an outstanding artist, friends. You know, I was just thinking about this. I was looking back at, how God has used me in that instance. I mean, the first sort of pastoral assignment that God had for me was at an Anglican church. I won't tell you where it is unless you try and figure it out, but Anglican church, somewhere in South Africa, okay? And I was a youth pastor there, and from the beginning it was clear that I didn't fit in. Like, I just didn't fit in because, let's just say, the ecclesiology was a little bit more traditional, and I wasn't fitting in, but I knew that God had a purpose for me right there. And so what I did was I managed to journey with these young adults, these late teens, early 20-somethings, and this one guy who was a Jew, literally, but he kind of hung around with with the people in that group because they were good friends. But he used to join us, on Friday nights and stuff. And I'll never remember that one night, I was talking about Jesus as a Messiah to him, and it didn't really quite make sense to him, but you could see, when someone's mind is working over. And then until eventually, it was a time for Q&A, and I knew that I would get really hard questions. And his question to me was, he said, so are you telling me that as a Jew, if I don't accept Jesus, that I'm not going to be with God forever? Brother Brad, that's a line in the sand. Brad is our Messianic Jew in our congregation. And I had to look at him in the eye and I had to say, yes. And he was offended. He was greatly offended. And then he went on to say, so are you telling me that the cows that our family slaughters in our backyard in order to honor and worship our ancestors so that they will bless us, are you also saying that's not right? I had to look him in the eye and said, yes. And I thought this guy would never come back. But he gave his life to Christ. You see, even though my stay in that church was very brief, I realized that God wanted to use me in this man's life. And I haven't seen him since then. That's like 13 years ago. But man, I became part of the story of his life. And I can just go on. But what I'm trying to tell you is the people in this world that you have met and will meet will never be the same without you. You have the power to change them, right? It's so funny, my kids, I was explaining this to my kids this morning, because this morning, on a Sunday mornings is a bit of a rush, right? So it's always a luxury to actually sit around the breakfast table. But because we were here yesterday and everything was already set up, we could actually have the time to sit around the breakfast table. Sat around the breakfast table, and so we're all having this peanut butter honey sandwiches, but on my plate I added like a banana, added an apple and all of that, and Judah, my son, he looks at me and he goes, Daddy, why are you eating more than us? You know, like, why are you eating more than us? So I said to Judah, my boy, like, I'm going to stand in front of the church and I'm going to talk to everyone. And so I need a bit more energy than you. You know, so I could see, couldn't quite understand. So I said, well, you know, what's going to come out of me is going to go into them, you know. And then he said, so are you saying the food that you're going to eat is going to come out of you and go into them? And I'm like, no, that's not what I mean. You know, so we had a fascinating breakfast conversation, but like, everyone you come across, even you guys are here today, like, you wouldn't have been here if you weren't there last Sunday. You know, I don't know if you will carry on being here, but the reason you're here today is hopefully something in our interaction would impart something onto you. So that's the whole point, is that you are intentionally chosen. Like, we always want to be chosen for the big stuff, you know, but you are chosen for everyone around you. Because you never know how long you're going to be in that company. You know, you never know how long you're going to be in that church. You never know how long you're going to live in that house. But however long you're there for, you are specifically chosen as a masterpiece by God. And then lastly, what I want to say is, your story matters. Your story matters. Don't let anyone tell you that your story does not matter. Because I think, especially in the age of social media, like, we always just want to hear about wonderful stories, you know? We always want to hear about the stories that have gone from, like, say, for example, someone who's dirt poor to now is like a billionaire. You know, but those kind of stories are like, they're anomalies. You know, they're not very common, but your story is so unique because it's your story. No one else has it. You know, and storytelling, I mean, you can ask Loreka, who works for Hardlines. Storytelling is one of the most powerful ways in which we can impart some life into people. So this is how we're going to do that in our church. So every fourth Sunday, traditionally at Pulse, used to be family service, right? And so it's in a sense still going to be a family-oriented service, but we are transforming that, and our last Sundays of the month will now be called Story Sundays. Right, so our last Sundays of the month will be called Story Sundays, where you will get to hear our families telling our stories. And you can be as creative as you want, you can use photos. I'd love to see some of you when you were a baby, you know, that would be so super cute, you know. But whatever the case is, like, you can be as creative as you want. You'll get prior notice, right? So next Sunday, this coming Sunday, the Jonathans and the Thomases are telling our stories. Right, so next Sunday, we will be telling you our stories, and it can go long, so don't worry, we have a template so that you're not here all day. But we will do that every month because we want to hear your story. We want to hear how you came to be who you are, because your story matters. You know, and your story is part of one bigger story. I mean, your story and my story, the story of the church, goes all the way back to thousands of years. We're part of that line, we're part of that lineage, we're part of that heritage, we're part of that tradition. And so we're connected in that way. And it's so beautiful for me to think that, you know, the same way we're gathered here this morning is the same way the early church used to gather in their homes and open the Bible and worship and sing to God and encourage one another. It's like there's a connection there, you know. There's a connection between us and those who don't believe in Jesus because we share a common humanity. Like, most of us go through the same struggles. And so we need those kind of uplifting stories in South Africa where the only stories we ever hear is bad stories and bad news, you know? Because the stories Christians should tell is how bad news became good news. We don't avoid the bad news, but the stories we want to tell is, it started off with bad news, but look how it's becoming good news. So we have a Christmas tradition at our home. You know, Christmas generally tends to be so busy, you know. In our family, especially, there's something on Christmas Eve, there's something on Christmas Day, there's something on Boxing Day, and it's like after those 3 days, you're like, can Christmas be over already, you know? In fact, I was at a church once that, oh my goodness, there was a Christmas Eve 6 p.m. service, Then a Christmas Eve, 12 midnight service. Then a Christmas morning, 6 a.m. service. Then a Christmas, and it was like, oh, you pretty much slept in the church, But we decided, okay, it's starting to rob a little bit of the joy of the season. So we decided, okay, we'll do Christmas Eve and Boxing Day with family, but on Christmas Day, it is just our family, right? It's just me and Kirsty and Mila and Judah. And we've been doing that every year, but we started this tradition where not only do we follow the same pattern and eat the same food, but in the afternoon, after we've had our Christmas lunch, we watch a movie called It's a Wonderful Life. And it's a beautiful movie. It's made in the 40s, but every time I watch it, it gets me. Even though you know what's coming. Isn't it so bizarre? Like, the stories are going to unfold, but sometimes it's like how some people watch rom-coms, They know what's going to happen, but yet it's like, tear. But it always gets to me because the story is essentially this guy who had big dreams and big aspirations for his life. But in the meantime, his brother gets to enjoy all of that, And the people around him get to travel the world, to own big companies and do this, all of that. And he gets to remain in a small little town. And then the depression hits in the US, and then he goes bankrupt, and then he starts hating life, and ultimately he wants to take his own life. Because he feels like his life is so small, his life is so insignificant, his story does not matter. And I love how there's some kind of divine intervention in the movie that shows him that his name is George Bailey, and this angel comes to George Bailey and goes, let me show you what all of these people's lives would have been like if you were not in the story. And so he takes this guy back to all these events, all these people. And that always gets to me because I think about my life, when in my own journey through shame, believing that my story is insignificant, it does not matter. But wow, think about your life and the people in your life, where they would not have been the same without you. Your story matters. Your story really matters. And you are at your best when you begin to live out God's intended purpose for your life. This is ultimately where we want to be, right? You are at your best when you're living out God's intended purpose for your life. And for me, the biggest tragedy is many of us abort that. Many of us hijack that because the road may just seem a little bit too hard. It may require a little bit more sacrifice. It may require you facing your pain rather than running away from it. It may require you running towards your fears instead of running away from them. But this is where Jesus comes in, right? This is where Jesus comes in. I mean, last Sunday, what I was saying to the church at BBC, I was saying, man, there's nothing that separates you from God's love. There is no condemnation. So it means that you can't really make a wrong move. Because if you are in Christ, like he was always ensured that if you take his hand, he will take your hand. And you will walk together down the path that he has set out for you. The problem is we are not taking his hand because we're afraid where he might lead us. But I can promise you guys, you are your happiest when you are being you. Not your broken you, but the you that's being transformed. Right? Because when we remain in our brokenness, often we say, let me be me, let me be me, let me be me. But this is how you know. When you say, I'm just me, but that me is causing people more hurt and more pain, that's not really you. That's the you that has been constructed because of the pain you've been through. And you have formed a personality and a persona, an identity that was not God's original design and intention for you. And that's a journey that Jesus takes us from that broken you to the real you, from that false you to the true you, so that you can become truly an original. I'll end with this. We had Darren and I attended a workshop at the beginning of May. And I love the premise of the workshop. The guy was saying that you want to be the right person in the right place at the right time, doing the right things for the right reasons. The right place, the right person, the right time, doing the right thing for the right reasons. And you're speaking about the story of Esther in the Bible and how she was so divinely appointed for that moment in time. No one else could have played that role but her. And I want to leave you with that this morning. No one else can play the role that you can play, whether you're a husband or a wife or a father or a mother or a son or a daughter or an employee. No one else can play that role but you. So cherish it, treasure it, cherish how God has made you. Because when you run your lane, when you put on your shoes and put on Christ, man, you can run that race so well. Like, you'll be the happiest person in the world. Because you're living out what you were created for, right? I mean, can you imagine, yesterday evening I was making some dal, some lentils, right? And the way I like my lentils is after it's made, you take the blender and you zhuzh it so that it becomes, all the stuff is liquefied, it becomes like quite thick, but it's so nice. Some people don't like their lentils that way. But imagine, instead of taking a blender, I took my vacuum cleaner, The next thing, the vacuum cleaner blows up. Why? The vacuum cleaner was not made to do that, right? You are not made to be someone else. You're not made to play someone else's role. You're not made for someone else's story. When you try that, you'll just blow up. When you play your part, you're happy, man, and you function the way God has created you to be. This is our number one value at Pulse. We value every human being, every human as a uniquely created being with a unique story and who has eternal worth. Let me pray for us this morning.